Hi everyone. So we have a full moon in the sign of Leo tomorrow, the 28th of January at 11:16 a.m. Pacific time. So you can translate that time to whatever that means for you. And it is a full moon in Leo that really encapsulates more the feeling of Leo as, it's a southern hemisphere friendly full moon because it certainly doesn't feel like Leo season in the northern hemisphere, where it is very much Aquarius season. So Leo is sort of the middle of summer, a middle of summer sign, and this is a middle of summer full moon. So a shout out to anyone who's watching this from the southern hemisphere. The southern hemisphere gets very short shrift. I mean, wow. Everything is truly so northern hemisphere centric or specific. It must be really kind of frustrating and puzzling as to how in this age of sensitivity and political correctness for some portion of the population, considering how divided things are, this divide between the northern and the southern hemisphere doesn't get much attention. This notion, however, of getting attention and opposites, northern southern hemisphere, for example, contrasts, relationships and partnerships, self versus collective, is of course very much intensified by this full moon. It is a full moon in Leo, and all you have to say is full moon in Leo to really have a sense of what this full moon in Leo is about. It is a full moon about the self and what is right for you and what feels authentic and what your heart truly wants and what needs to be protected, what you are loyal to. It's a full moon that looks at boundaries. It's a full moon that looks at your creativity and your self-expression and your sense of self-confidence. It is an angry full moon insofar as it is a full moon that is square the planet Mars in Taurus, and Mars is a planet of anger and violence and drive and passion and activity and going after what you want, being single-minded. And so in that regard, it's a kind of a selfish full moon. But I would say that in Leo, selfish really in a healthy and a necessary way right now, because there's so much preoccupation with regard to the collective, socially, politically, and in all those ways. So a certain amount of thinking around how am I feeling, what does this apply to me, how does this apply to me, is perhaps warranted. Now, I will tell you, whether it feels volatile for you or not, for some people it seems like the full moon has almost been active over the past week. It is a full moon in Leo, and on its way to becoming full, it is square the planet Mars. Mars is in Taurus, but on its way to becoming full, it squares Uranus, and therefore activates this. It opposes Saturn, squares Uranus on its way to being full. And yesterday I did a video on the Saturn-Uranus square. So it activates, or is having a conversation with that as the moon is becoming full. In addition, the moon is trine Chiron, which Saturn sextiles. So what you've got at the time of the full moon, kids, is Saturn, the Sun, and Jupiter. The Sun and the Jupiter are right next to each other. They're conjunct. The Sun and Jupiter are opposite the Moon. The Moon has already opposed Saturn on its way to getting to opposite the Sun and Jupiter. At the same time, it is square Mars in Uranus, and on its way to the full moon, it also squared Uranus in Taurus and Chiron in Aries. So you've got a full moon square Mars opposite Jupiter, and on its way to getting there, it opposed Saturn, squared Uranus, trine Chiron. Okay, all of this is going to make sense in a second. At the same time, it is impossible to ignore that this is a full moon that is happening really a few minutes, a few hours after Venus and Pluto come together in Capricorn. What does all of this mean? Okay. It is a full moon that, for some full moons, on the positive side, can bring culminations and completions and contracts and pushing people into the limelight. And they can also bring clarity on something that has been murky, something that has been gaining in visibility slowly and gradually. And then the disk of the moon is revealed, and either it shines as a spotlight on something, or it brings something to completion, or it brings something into greater visibility. On the negative or the challenging side, whatever is being brought into visibility or into consciousness somehow creates an emotional reaction. volatility, a meltdown, a temper tantrum, tears. I think of a full moon as the wave that starts at the new moon crashing on the shore. I think of the full moon as a small bubble that starts at the bottom of the ocean at the time of the new moon, and by the time it comes to the surface, with a big pop, much bigger than when it started. I think of a full moon as a pot of milk boiling over. If you are on the receiving end of, or if you are providing the tantrum in question, I would certainly say, even if you decide to pull back on the emotional volatility and the potential violence related to this full moon, I would say pay attention to what is on the base, or at the heart, very Leover word, at the heart of what it is that is bothering you. When Venus conjuncts Pluto, there's a death and a transformation. There's a power struggle related to what you value. Money, relationships. Okay, so we're getting into a full moon. Remember that till February the 11th, we are still wrapping up an old set of energies that have been in place since September 2017, but especially the middle of July 2018. And the Capricorn side of things, again, there's some videos just recently I did on Venus and Capricorn and the Capricorn transits. You can take a look at those. I'll put a link to some of these videos at the end of this one. So something comes to a head. There's certainly a death and a transformation related to relationships and money, and the relationship between abundance and your relationships, and the quality of your abundance and the quality of your relationships, and something dies out, something is transformed, something. For some people, it could be a windfall. For some people, it could be a sudden and transformative gain. For other people, when Pluto is involved, we are looking at power dynamics and power struggles. We're looking at empowering ourselves. We're looking at reevaluating or transforming or undergoing a death and transformation of what we value, who we value. Venus, relationships, money, luxuries, creativity, our creative life, creative professions, luxury professions, the fine arts, fashion, cosmetics, the beauty industry, Venusian stuff, interior decoration, certain aspects of art and architecture. So all of that undergoes kind of a transformation. The relationship side of things, the financial side of things, what we value, how we are valued goes through a transformation and creates probably some sort of a power struggle where we are taking our power back and empowering ourselves, and where someone is probably might be trying to tie us down or empower themselves at our cost in some way. So somewhere that energy has been in the works, and that transit completes a couple of hours before the full moon. So when you're dealing with the full moon in Leo right after a Venus-Pluto conjunction, you can't help but think that in this very proud and protective sign of Leo, what is this full moon really about? And there is an element with this full moon of crap hitting the fan, because the moon, which seeks emotional security and is governed by kind of intuitive emotional forces, which we typically don't appreciate or value enough to really understand. We're constantly trying to repress our emotions for the most part, or trying to rationalize them. And then Mars in Taurus square each other. So it's almost like in order for both these planets to reach some sort of a sense of comfort, they kind of need to challenge each other to do certain things to kind of explode or expand this this chokehold that they're going to place on each other. So crap hitting the fan, anger, frustration. On the positive side, you may be moved to act on things that further you along, it may move you to get off your butt to start taking care of certain things that feel necessary for your progress in a way that you have not been. It may infuse you with a certain energy to push yourself into the limelight and to take your own sense of what is important to you forward and feel like, might be true even after the election and everything that's going on. It could be a sense of, okay, now where am I at? What about me? What about my to-do list? I've been paying so much attention to the collective, to what is going on socially and collectively, that it's time for me to act. As I said, it could also be something very protective about the death and power struggle within and transformation within relationships, money, shared resources to some extent, conservative structures, hierarchies, conservative ways of viewing hierarchy, where sort of relationship and finances are going through some sort of a transformation, and we feel the need to protect ourselves, assert our boundaries, protect our heart, fight for what is important to us, perform a little bit. It's a full moon in Leo. All of that could be operating. Now, as I mentioned to you yesterday, this full moon opposes Saturn, squares Uranus, and then is opposite the Sun and Jupiter in Aquarius. And again, this gives it an initiatory quality, because the planet Jupiter is invariably about endings and new beginnings, auspicious new beginnings, where the sign of Aquarius is, and the Sun is right next to Jupiter. So Jupiter is getting its own kind of boost, combust, rebirth through sort of being made invisible through the rays of the Sun. It's getting purified. But the full moon is opposite Jupiter. And so, again, it has this initiatory quality, because as we discussed yesterday, in order for us to truly make progress in a part of a chart that over the 5 years is trying to liberate us and authenticate us and make us more authentic, we have to do a certain amount of work with Saturn in Uranus to do the disciplined, to take the disciplined step-by-step foundation building, next step related tasks that we need to do this year, especially with Jupiter's inauguratory quality. I made up a word there, I have no doubt, but over the next 2 years. So on the collective level, if we're moving towards with Uranus and Taurus, and Mars's presence there for the rest of January and February accelerates this, or wants to initiate this again, or wants to put some fire behind this, if Uranus in Taurus is moving us towards greater sustainability in terms of agriculture and climate change and taking care of the planet, and greater sustainability in terms of income and income distribution, there's work that needs to be done on a social equality and justice level this year and next year that goes hand in hand with that creates sort of a cause and egg, chicken and egg relationship between both these energies. In your part of the chart, we cannot ignore that this is a full moon opposite Uranus. We cannot ignore that Uranus has the Saturn, Sun, Jupiter, and Mercury. We cannot ignore that Mercury is practically stationary and goes retrograde 2 days from the full moon. So whatever crap hits the fan with the full moon, it is not going to be clear about really being decisive about it and start to get some sort of resolution till after Mercury goes direct on February the 21st. So where the full moon happens, crap hits the fan, and it pushes us into Aquarius season even more, because January the 30th, Mercury goes retrograde. February the 1st, Venus enters Aquarius. We have choices we have to consider, opportunities, financial, relationship. There's a sweetness that is brought into the equation on the one hand, but at the same time with Mercury retrograde, there are things from the past we still have to go over, and the choices appear, but they are not clear. We're not ready. Details still need to be worked out. There are things that are still unclear and need to be reprocessed. Part of it is that since the middle of November, we have been seeing this forward movement, and boy has there been forward movement, and by the end of January, when Mercury goes retrograde, we have a 3-week period where our mind has to take stock of where we're at right now. There's a huge wave with the election, with everything that has sort of brought us to where we're at today. And now Mercury kind of just has to go, can I take stock of where we're at? So on a collective level, it could be things like, what's really going on with, it could be people in the White House trying to make sense of what the hell we actually know, what the data actually is, and if we've made promises, do we need to readjust them based on what we're finding out? This idea of going back over past data and reframing, preparing for the next round of forward movement that starts at the end of February and takes us into March and April, there is a need to just, it's like it's time to consult our project plans and just make sure that everything still holds, and it won't. There's data and information that needs to be incorporated, as a result of which it is not the time to make decisions as much as it is time to examine the basis of decision making. Choices will appear, and this full moon will bring something to the surface, either as a contract, either something comes through, it initiates something that doesn't get resolved till the middle of March, because Mercury goes direct February 21st, but then is still in Aquarius till February the 28th. Also, this full moon is in Leo. The sun rules Leo. The sun is in Aquarius. Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, which is in Aquarius. So Saturn is in a sign that it rules. Aquarius is also ruled by Uranus, who is in Taurus. Taurus is ruled by Venus, which is in Capricorn. Venus is ruled by Saturn. Venus and Pluto have just come conjunct. Saturn is the overall ruler of this chart. There's a sense of discipline, hard work, needing to take stock of and do whatever it is that is next that needs to be done. Even the Mercury retrograde cannot ignore the Uranus-Saturn square, because Mercury retrograde is ruled by both in Aquarius, Saturn and Uranus, ultimately Saturn. Foundation building, your ambitions, your potential. What are the next steps, and what have you been waiting for? This full moon either lights a fire under, well, it lights a fire under your belly somehow, and some of it has to do with dealing with power struggles related to finance and relationships that have been going on over the past 2.5 years, and some of it is about the first Saturn-Uranus squares on February the 14th, and then we have it again in June and November. Whatever the Saturn-Uranus square is doing isn't over till the end of the year. There may be multiple tests, multiple iterations. If you know where Aquarius sits in your chart, if you know where Taurus sits in your chart, if you know where Leo sits in your chart, a lot of this becomes clear. Somewhere there's also an opportunity of healing, but healing does not occur until you become aware of and start to feel the wound. So it's a pretty, some astrologers would say it is an angry, volatile full moon. I would say it is an assertive full moon. Something could happen over the next 48 hours that has a meltdown quality, a revelation that is truly problematic. It's happening in Donald Trump's first house. He could be pushed in the limelight in somewhere. Certainly, again, it feels something about this full moon has already been active over the past week or so. You know, just the impeachment trial being brought to the Senate is full moony enough. But what is it that occurs in the next 48 hours that brings things up in this kind of way? Irrespective, you know, it's hard for me not to think of that particular chart as we talk about this. Visibility, tantrums, meltdowns, completions, conclusions, contracts. But guys, Mercury going retrograde 2 days after, we do not typically advise signing contracts while Mercury is retrograde, so between now and February 25th, if you have to, and sometimes you have to, look at everything 3 or 4 times, make sure the details are clear. The details will be slippery. It's time to think about and suss out and figure out and thresh out the details, because after Mercury goes direct, you will learn more about the situation. You will know more, and more will become clear. So somewhere with this full moon, choices are introduced, and the choices, there's certainly an ending and a new beginning related to this full moon on multiple levels. It's opposite Jupiter. Venus and Pluto have been conjunct. But the next steps related to this require boundaries, looking at our patterns and our behaviors that have been holding us back from meeting our potential and moving towards that potential. With Saturn, often it is a sense of responsibility, a sense of conservatively building towards where you need to go, lessons that need to be learned, something karmic that needs to be dealt with. There's also a throwback potentially to issues that were in play from December the 9th, 2016 to the end of January 2019, when there were eclipses in Leo. Something related to that, the Leo Aquarius eclipses of 2017 and 2018 are being put in front of us at this full moon table to say, this is where you need to act. If you were to say what needs to be closed out, I would say it's related to the Cancer Capricorn eclipses since the middle of July 2018 to the end of 2020. If you were to say what new is trying to move forward again, I would say whatever was related to the Leo Aquarius eclipses from December the 9th, 2016 to the end of January 2019. Happy full moon. You may be moved to, in different parts of your life, assert yourself and defend your boundaries, and at the same time start to get off your butt towards moving towards something that is really important to you and that your heart desires. I suggest you get on with it, but at the same time be very cognizant and be very present to the fact that February is a spin cycle with Mercury going retrograde. With all this forward movement that has been going on since the middle of November to now, we find ourselves in a place where we mentally have to take stock of where we're at. As I said, at the White House, this could be things like, so how many vaccines do we, what has been going on? What do we, looking at past it, going back to the project plan to figure out what needs to be tweaked, how promises need to be tweaked. Going back during February, get off your butts and create choices that make you really think about and tread through the issues in question, so that by the time you can postpone decision making and contract signing ideally to February 23rd onwards. I don't know that it'll be possible for everyone, but that's what it will be. This could be past stuff where the boundaries are really being set up by February the 11th, and future stuff that pushes you towards starting to take some action that puts you in some sort of spin cycle, makes you look at details, gets you off your butt to move towards what you want. But again, this is a full moon that is inaugurating things in some respect that carry us into the middle of March. Sometimes new moons happen before a full moon in the opposite sign. Sometimes full moons happen first, like this year in Leo, and the new moon happens 2 weeks later in Aquarius. It's easier to understand when a new moon happens in one sign and a full moon 2 weeks later in the opposite sign. You can see the growth. You can see opposite signs are in conversation with each other all the time, just as opposite principles are. We think it's night or day. It's really night and day. If it was day all the time, we would not have a word for night or day. We would have no word for the phenomenon, probably, because there would be no need for it. We think it's night or day, but it really is night and day. If we think it's good or bad, but it really is good and bad. Similarly with opposite signs and opposite houses, they're so distinguishing, and you need that distinguishing factor that one creates the other, supports the other, is in constant conversation with the other. So this full moon is really setting us up for the new moon in Aquarius. And so not only does it exercise influence like a normal full moon for the next 2 weeks, in some ways it is exercising influence all the way till, again, the middle of March, because the February 11th new moon is going to take us to about March the 13th. March the 15th, Mercury leaves Aquarius. And some of the planetary intensity in Aquarius starts to die down. But all these planets in Aquarius are forcing us to inaugurate and move forward with sort of a 2-month cycle right now with Aquarius, the 2-year cycle that we're in till the end of 2022 with Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius, and also a 20-year cycle where the sign of Aquarius now is activated with the Jupiter-Saturn grand conjunction that occurred on December 21st, 2020. So it's an important month. You know what needs to be done next to propel you forward in order to meet your dreams. It's time to act. It's not time to decide. But it's time to harness the energy. The days after a full moon, the 3 or 4 days after a full moon, can be the most productive in a month. Go for it. And at the same time, with this Venus-Pluto conjunction, unless you've just been made a millionaire, or unless it's a financial windfall for you, or unless it's a transformation that is for the positive, somewhere it still involves coming back to who you are in your heart and your core and setting boundaries as it needs to. We may be juggling both those things. There's a fair amount of juggling. This full moon feeding into the new moon is important because by the time the new moon occurs, Mercury will be well and truly retrograde at that time, on February the 11th. So, yeah, here we are, 6 weeks. 3 weeks now of taking stock of where we're at. As a collective, people who are, as I said, in the White House, everyone is going to have to, people who are no longer in the White House, everyone is going to be taking stock of, what does this mean? Where am I at? I think I'm going here. This is where the compass is taking me. But something is telling me that now it's time to go back to my plans and really just check everything to make sure we are on course, because the data will change. So if I thought I'd be able to do something in 3 months' time, or I thought I'd be able to do this, or I thought I'd be able to do that, there's something about taking stock. The mind has not adjusted to all the forward movement that has occurred, and we need to come back to reality, slow down, which our lives don't really support, and the slowing down is essential. Some of the slowdowns are forced by travel snafus and lost baggage and meetings not happening or having to be postponed, or them being late, or them being ineffective, or customer service, Mercury retrograde stuff around this full moon, close to the 30th, close to Feb 21st. So that will be occurring as well. So happy full moon. Pay attention to what is going on. It is a little more charged than a normal full moon, and a little bit more important. February the 14th, 2 months after the December 14th eclipse, the week before, week after, is going to be kind of significant too. February is a very important month. We've had a new year, but that new year has been in place since the middle of November. In some ways, this new year, with everything that is now in place, really gets started at the end of February through the middle of March. And that's what this full moon is igniting. All right. If you like this video, found it useful, feel free to share this puppy, like it, comment on it. Likes and comments give it greater circulation on YouTube. My contact information is in the description box. You can contact me to inquire about rates for readings, or rates for me making an easy-to-read version of your chart that'll tell you where which house incorporates which sign and what those houses stand for. Do not send me your personal information, birth time, birth date, until you get my rates and feel like you want to move forward. If you know where Aquarius and Taurus and Leo sit in your chart, and Aries, because Chiron is in Aries, this reading will make that much more sense to you, because ultimately it's Mars and Taurus that is trying to continue to push and make progress. There's work that needs to be done in Aquarius that is absolutely necessary, and that is where our attention needs to be. And somewhere this full moon in Aquarius lights the fire to get us moving. Get us moving in a way that does not support decision making till the end of February. All right, over and out.